He is known simply as Dubya. A decade ago, George W. Bush announced he was leading America into war with Iraq. But since leaving office, this most controversial of presidents has proved somewhat elusive. We've been on the trail in Texas, where we came across his latest project, self-portraits in the bath. But don't worry, there are no disturbing images in this report by our Washington correspondent, Matt Frei.
We're desperately seeking George Bush. Have you seen him at all? No? You seen George Bush around? You haven't seen him? Hey, you seen George Bush? Estamos buscando a George Bush. ¿Ha visto a George Bush? No.
And these are his neighbors.
Hello.
Presidents retire, but they don't tend to disappear. Think of Carter or Clinton. They all stayed in the limelight. But George W. Bush is different. And nowhere is his absence felt more than here in Crawford, the town where W has his beloved ranch.
Isn't it strange to think that George W. Bush was once such an overbearing presence in all our lives? To coin a phrase, you were either with him or against him. But since retirement, he's become, well, the invisible man. And this place, Crawford, Texas, to which he dragged one world leader after another, has become a ghost town.
The illustrious ghost has left plenty of traces. There's the petrol station restaurant that bears his name, the abandoned souvenir shops. And yes, the man himself, unusually inscrutable. Crawford is a one-industry town, and the industry used to be called George W. Bush Memorabilia.
And they are still buying Bush memorabilia. Watch out, George!
Cathy Horton has seen it all come and go.
At one time, looking down the street, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this is
7 souvenir shops
in this one town at one time, and now there is one.
Yours?
Yes, we were the first to open, and we will be the last to close.
But even Invisible George wants to leave a legacy, and like every president since Roosevelt, he's created an institute and a library. This mausoleum of memories is near his other home in Dallas. And when it opens, it'll tell you all the things about W you didn't know. Jim Glassman used to work for George Bush in the White House and now runs his institute.
I mean, he's almost the invisible president, isn't he?
He's chosen to be. He's taken a low profile. He believes in the presidency as a stewardship. So he had it for 8 years. He's not the president anymore. He doesn't want to be sitting on the sidelines kibitzing or criticizing. It's a tough job. And he wants to get on with what he considers to be his life's work, which is the work that he's doing in health, education, helping women around the world. These are the kinds of things that really motivate him.
For instance, George Bush has been quietly sneaking off to Zambia, helping to fight cervical cancer, amongst other diseases.
I believe freedom is important for peace. And I believe one aspect of freedom is people to be free from disease.
This was a surgery built by his institute.
I believe that quiet service is the best kind of service. You're always the former president, but I want to come here as a laborer.
This was the president turned laborer wielding a paint roller. And despite the PR potential, no press cameras were invited along. It turns out that it isn't just us looking for the real George W. It is W himself in the most surprising places. Recognize these toes and knees soaking in the tub? Or how about this back, a new version of the shower scene? Yes, they all belong to W, as does the hand that painted them in oils. We give you the artist formerly known as President George W. Bush.
He doesn't just dabble, he's serious about it. And by the way, I've heard him say that his interest in painting really came from reading Churchill.
Churchill famously painted, but never himself in the nude, and he wasn't big on dogs. W loves to paint his own and other people's.
In fact, he sat right there and he said to me, "Do you have a dog?" And I said, "I do." He goes, "Send me his picture."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He was going to paint a portrait of your dog?
Yes.
Have you done it?
I'm still waiting for it.
This, by the way, is W's favorite restaurant in Dallas. The owner's a good friend, and this was the table at which he was having his usual crab souffle when he got the news that Osama bin Laden had been killed by his successor. Even in his secluded retirement, recent history has a way of intruding.
This one calls for the arrest of George W. Bush.
An Iraqi-American, Hadi Jawad, and his small group of friends are determined not to let the world forget about the Iraq War.
If George W. Bush walked onto your porch right now, what would you say?
I would say to him, Mr. President, your actions were evil. You inflicted needless suffering on hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. You should turn yourself in to the authorities for all the crimes that you and your administration committed.
So I spent several years going through many surgeries. Post-traumatic stress disorder, went through a bad divorce, took on a lot of debt, did a lot of time drinking, started using methamphetamines to cope.
Like thousands of others, Brandon Blackstone saw his life upended by Iraq. A former Marine, he was almost killed and now works with fellow war veterans not far from Bush's house. But listen to this.
He made a very controversial decision that changed the course of our nation forever. And I personally wouldn't change anything about what I did or my involvement in the war. And I don't feel sorry for any of the decisions that he made.
Back in Crawford, the ranch is as much of a fortress as it was when Bush was in power. Here, one of the least popular and most controversial presidents ever soldiers away at his canvases and his good works in Africa, patiently waiting for history to decide which George Bush will be remembered. Matt Frei, Channel 4 News, Texas.